May 29, 1453, Constantinople falls. The Byzantine Empire, once the proud heart of Eastern Christianity, crumbles beneath the Ottoman onslaught. But while Orthodox Christians mourned, what were the Catholics doing? Praying? Protesting? Or celebrating? Today we dive deep into one of the most controversial questions of medieval history. Did Western Catholics rejoice at the fall of their Eastern Christian brothers? Was it religious rivalry, political indifference, or something far more complex? The Schism of 1054, also known as the Great Schism, was the formal split between the Roman Catholic Church in the West and the Eastern Orthodox Church in the East. Although tensions had been building for centuries, the schism marked the official break in Christian unity that had once bound the two halves of the Roman Empire together under one faith. The divide was rooted in cultural, political, and theological differences. The Western Church, centered in Rome, used Latin, while the Eastern Church, based in Constantinople, used Greek. As the Western Roman Empire fell and the Eastern Byzantine Empire survived, the two regions developed distinct traditions, priorities, and interpretations of Christianity. One major point of contention was the authority of the Pope. The Church in Rome claimed universal jurisdiction over all Christians, while the Eastern Church believed in a more conciliar model of leadership, where patriarchs of major cities shared authority more equally. Another issue was the Filioque clause, a phrase added to the Nicene Creed in the West that stated the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. The East rejected this addition, arguing it was unauthorized and theologically incorrect. Tensions finally erupted in 1054 when Pope Leo IX sent a delegation to Constantinople, led by Cardinal Humbert. After failed negotiations with Patriarch Michael Cerularius, Humbert placed a bull of excommunication on the altar of the Hagia Sophia, denouncing the Patriarch. In response, Cerularius excommunicated the legates. Though initially seen as a temporary crisis, the breach solidified over time. The schism wasn't just about religion, it was about identity, empire, language, and power. Despite various attempts at reconciliation, the divide between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches has persisted for nearly a millennium, symbolizing one of the most significant fractures in Christian history. The Fourth Crusade, launched in 1202, was originally intended to reclaim Jerusalem by striking at Muslim power in Egypt. However, it took a dramatically different and controversial turn that ended not in the Holy Land, but in the heart of Christian Byzantium. What began as a religious expedition turned into one of the most shocking betrayals in medieval history. Due to financial troubles, the Crusaders struck a deal with the Republic of Venice, which agreed to transport the army in exchange for payment. When the Crusaders failed to raise the full amount, Venice proposed an alternative: assist in capturing the Christian city of Zara to settle the debt. Although Zara was a Catholic city under papal protection, the Crusaders agreed. This act already placed the mission on unstable moral ground. Soon after, the Crusaders were drawn into the internal politics of the Byzantine Empire. A deposed prince, Alexios Pharangelos, promised vast rewards and military support if the Crusaders helped him reclaim the throne in Constantinople. Desperate for funds and support, the Crusaders agreed and successfully installed Alexios IV as CO Emperor. However, he was unable to fulfill his promises, and tensions between the Crusaders and Byzantines escalated. In April 1204, the Crusaders stormed Constantinople. The city, a center of Eastern Christianity and culture for nearly a millennium, was sacked with brutal force. Churches were looted, relics stolen, and civilians slaughtered. It was one of the most devastating attacks ever carried out against a Christian city by fellow Christians. The Crusaders established the short-lived Latin Empire in Constantinople, but the act left a deep and lasting scar on East-West Christian relations. The Fourth Crusade did not reach Jerusalem, nor did it defeat Islam. Instead, it destroyed the heart of the Byzantine Empire and deepened the schism between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. It stands as a tragic example of how political ambition, greed, and religious zeal can combine to unleash devastation far from the original goal. The decline of Byzantium was a slow and painful process, marked by internal strife, military defeats, and growing pressure from both East and West. Once a mighty empire that had preserved Roman traditions for centuries, Byzantium gradually lost its territories, resources, and influence. By the 13th and 14th centuries, it had become a shadow of its former self, politically weakened, economically strained, and militarily vulnerable. The Fourth Crusade in 1204 dealt a devastating blow when Crusaders sacked Constantinople and established the Latin Empire. Although the Byzantines reclaimed the city in 1261, the empire never fully recovered. The once wealthy capital was drained, trade routes had shifted, and powerful Italian maritime republics like Venice and Genoa dominated commerce. Internally, civil wars and dynastic disputes further weakened central authority. As the Ottoman Turks advanced through Anatolia and the Balkans in the 14th and 15th centuries, Byzantium found itself surrounded and increasingly desperate. Constantinople became more of a fortified city-state than an empire. Facing imminent collapse, the emperors began reaching out to the West for help, appealing to fellow Christians for military aid against the Ottomans. These pleas often came with a price. Western leaders demanded the unification of the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. This was deeply unpopular among the Byzantine clergy and population, who viewed Latin Christianity with suspicion and resentment, especially after the trauma of the Fourth Crusade. Still, emperors like John VIII Palaiologos attended councils in the West and even agreed to union in hopes of securing support, but the promised aid was limited and slow to arrive. By the time of the final siege in 1453, help from the West was too little and too late. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottomans as a dominant power. The desperate pleas for help had failed to save Byzantium, and the centuries-old rift between Eastern and Western Christianity only deepened. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and a turning point in world history. For centuries, Constantinople had stood as a symbol of Christian endurance, a fortress between East and West, and the capital of a once mighty empire. But by the 15th century, it was surrounded by the rapidly expanding Ottoman Empire and reduced to a weakened city-state with crumbling defenses and limited resources. The Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, only 21 years old at the time, set his sights on conquering the city and claiming its strategic and symbolic importance. In April 1453, he launched a massive siege with an army estimated at over 80,000 men and powerful artillery, including the enormous bombard cannon that relentlessly pounded the city's ancient walls. In contrast, the Byzantines had only about 7,000 defenders, including a few hundred foreign allies, most notably the Genoese commander Giovanni Giustiniani. For weeks, the defenders held out, using their intimate knowledge of the city's fortifications and desperate determination to protect what remained of their empire. Religious processions filled the streets, and hope rested on divine intervention or a last-minute rescue from Western Europe. But despite repeated pleas for help, only a small number of ships from the West arrived, offering minimal support. On May 29, 1453, after weeks of bombardment and failed assaults, the Ottomans launched a final, all-out attack. They breached the walls, and fierce fighting broke out inside the city. Emperor Constantine's eye is said to have fought and died with his soldiers in the streets, refusing to flee. Ottoman troops poured in, looting churches, homes, and palaces, and claiming the city as their own. Hagia Sophia, the grand cathedral of Eastern Christianity, was converted into a mosque. The fall of Constantinople shocked the Christian world. It marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of the Roman Empire, and the rise of the Ottoman Empire as a major power. It also sent a wave of Greek scholars fleeing westward, carrying classical knowledge that helped fuel the European Renaissance. The fall was not just a military defeat, it was the collapse of a civilization and the beginning of a new era. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was met with a complex mix of reactions in the West, ranging from deep sorrow to surprising indifference. For centuries, the Byzantine Empire had served as a Christian bulwark against Islamic expansion, and the loss of its capital, one of Christianity's most revered cities, was a profound event. Yet the Western response was fragmented, shaped by political rivalries, religious divisions, and shifting priorities. Many in Western Europe were genuinely horrified. News of Constantinople's fall spread quickly, and the idea that a great Christian city had been conquered by Muslim forces stirred fear and grief, especially among religious leaders and scholars. Pope Nicholas V declared a day of mourning and called for a new crusade to reclaim the city. Church bells tolled across Italy, and sermons lamented the fall as both a divine punishment and a tragedy for Christendom. Humanist writers compared the event to the fall of Rome, marking it as the end of an age. However, this grief was not matched by coordinated action. Despite dramatic rhetoric, no major crusade followed. Many Western powers were preoccupied with their own conflicts. The 100 Years' War between England and France had just ended, and the various Italian states were more concerned with regional rivalries than distant crusades. Political fragmentation made collective military action difficult, and previous experiences, like the failed Crusade of Nicopolis or the memory of the Fourth Crusade's betrayal of Byzantium, had dampened enthusiasm for such campaigns. Religious divisions also played a role. The schism between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, officially dating back to 1054, created lasting suspicion and mistrust. Some in the West viewed the Byzantines as schismatics who had resisted union with Rome for too long, and therefore partly responsible for their own downfall. This theological distance, coupled with the memory of strained attempts at reunion, reduced the sense of shared responsibility. While individuals grieved and some small efforts at support were made, the broader Western reaction was largely passive. The fall of Constantinople was mourned in word more than deed. It revealed the fractured state of Christendom and the waning power of religious unity to mobilize a united military response. Ultimately, the West watched as a historic Christian capital fell, marking not just the end of Byzantium, but also the failure of Christendom to act as one. The fall of Byzantium and the rise of the Ottoman Empire unfolded not just on the battlefield, but also in the realm of diplomacy, commerce, and pragmatic politics, what we might call realpolitik. Nowhere was this more evident than in the behavior of the Italian maritime republics, particularly Venice and Genoa. Though nominally Christian and part of Western Christendom, both states prioritized trade, wealth, and strategic advantage over religious solidarity with the crumbling Byzantine Empire. For centuries, Venice and Genoa had competed fiercely for control of Mediterranean trade. Constantinople had long been a vital hub for commerce, and both republics maintained merchant colonies there. While they benefited from their ties to the Byzantines, they also recognized the growing power of the Ottomans and began negotiating with them to preserve their economic interests. Venice, in particular, was skilled at balancing relations between Christian and Muslim powers, making trade agreements even as wars raged around them. When the Ottomans besieged Constantinople in 1453, the response from Venice and Genoa was cautious and limited. Some individuals, like the Genoese commander Giovanni Giustiniani, fought bravely alongside the Byzantines, but their support was personal rather than state-backed. Officially, both republics hesitated to provoke the Ottomans, fearing damage to their trade networks. Venice had already signed treaties with the Ottomans in previous years, securing privileges for its merchants. After the city fell, Venice quickly adjusted to the new reality, negotiating further agreements to maintain access to the lucrative markets of the East. This pragmatic approach reflects the essence of realpolitik, prioritizing national interest, economic gain, and long-term survival over ideology or religious unity. While the fall of Constantinople was mourned in churches and lamented in sermons, in the counting houses of Venice and Genoa, it was treated as a geopolitical shift to be managed, not avenged. Their choices underscore the growing dominance of economic realism over crusading zeal in late medieval Europe, a trend that would only accelerate in the centuries to come. The question of whether Western Catholics rejoiced at the fall of Constantinople in 1453 does not have a simple answer. There was no widespread celebration in the streets of Europe, no formal declaration of joy at the loss of a great Christian city. Instead, the reaction was mixed, marked by moments of sorrow, silence, political calculation, and, in some quarters, indifference. Many in the Catholic West were genuinely grieved. Church leaders, scholars, and devout Christians saw the fall as a tragedy for Christendom and a sign of divine punishment or moral failure. There were calls for unity, for repentance, and even for new crusades, but this grief did not translate into unified action. The long-standing schism between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches had left deep wounds. Some in the West viewed the Byzantines with suspicion, blaming them for resisting reunion with Rome. Others were simply focused on their own conflicts and interests. The Italian merchant republics, for example, were more concerned with maintaining profitable trade with the Ottomans than defending a distant empire. So while there may have been no rejoicing, there was also no large-scale mobilization to save or avenge Constantinople. The fall was met with a mix of mourning and realpolitik. In the end, Western Christendom reacted with words more than deeds, revealing a fractured world where shared faith was no longer enough to guarantee solidarity. The question itself, did they rejoice, exposes the painful truth of a divided Christendom at the twilight of Byzantium.